Next, we're going to talk more about participant observation. Participant observation is when the researcher participates in the daily life of the subjects in some way to learn more about people in their natural setting. This is much more commonly used than non-participant observation. Participant observation has two key words, observation and participation. In order to make sure we understand it, it's important to talk about what it is not, because participant observation is different than just pure observation. Pure observation is when the researcher is removed from the actions and behaviors of the people under study. They're never directly involved with those group of people. On the other hand, participant observation is different because the researcher not only observes, they also participate. However, you also have to note that this is different than pure participation. Pure participation happens when the researcher becomes so involved with the group under study, they almost no longer are doing research because they can't be objective anymore. Pure participation can also be called going native, and it's different because participant observation still needs to have that research goal maintained to get unbiased results. You can't completely join in with the group of people you're studying. When we previously talked about participant observation, we talked all the way about the levels from passive to complete participant observation. Complete participant observation has problems with ethics because then the researcher is like an undercover spy and the people don't know they're being observed. This can allow the researcher to get very close to the subject but does have ethical concerns because the people don't know. Usually, we go somewhere in the middle now, and people do moderate or active participation where there is a balance between being a complete insider, like in complete participation, and a complete outsider, like a non-participation study. When you decide how much the researcher should participate, you need to ask yourself, like, what is the research question? In order to get to an answer to my research question, would it be unethical for me to do something like complete participation? What method should I use in this research study? What practical factors do I need to consider? Like how much time and energy and effort can I devote to this? So the decisions need to really be made on a case-by-case basis. Also, there's some general suggestions for doing observation because it is a very long, involved process. The first one is to be unobtrusive in your actions. The second, become familiar with the setting before collecting other types of data. So you want to just note what it looks like, how it's set up in general. Be tolerant of ambiguity is number 3. You need to be adaptive and flexible because you never know what's going to happen. Pay attention and alternate between the wide and narrow views of the situation. That means you can look at all the people or focus on single people at different times. You want to look at interactions in the setting. So who speaks with who, who's respected, who's the boss, how are decisions made. Listen carefully to conversations, look for key words. Write these down word for word when you can to help you remember the conversation later. Specifically concentrate on the first and last remarks of a conversation. These are the most easily remembered. It can be very difficult to pay attention for long periods of time, so capitalize on those moments where the most important information is being shared. Fieldwork can also sometimes combine observation with interviews or even questionnaires, which we're going to learn about next. So just beware that observation does also get mixed with other primary data collection methods. And be determined and have faith in yourself because it can be a long and involved process. I'm also going to talk in more detail about the general steps for participant observation. Before you start, you do need to get permission. So you need to choose a site that could be some kind of business, for example, and ask top management for permission to carry out their study. This is also when you can become familiar with the research setting, which was tip number 2 in the 10 tips for participant observation. Number 2, establish rapport. This is where you can become an accepted member of who you're going to be studying. So experts in observation caution against selecting the first people you encounter as those that you consider your key informants, because these people are usually outsiders from the main group that people who study this call deviants, or they want to check out the new person, what professionals call professional stranger handlers. So Instead, you should really take time to find out who the most well-respected member of the group is that can kind of vouch for you and explain your presence, that can act as what we call a sponsor. Using that sponsor, you can get some credibility and establish rapport with the group. Also, as you begin meeting and chatting with people to develop relationships over an extended period of time, you can develop that rapport or the trusting relationship by being respectful, being truthful, showing commitment to why you're there, helping people to feel secure by actively listening, ensuring them that you will maintain their confidentiality as you're working on the study, for example. Then we move on to what you should actually observe. So once you've kind of found your place in the workplace or the work site, first you start with descriptive observation. So there's so much information that can be collected in observational studies. Where to begin does depend on the study, but descriptive observation leaves the researcher open to like everything around them. So you could gather information on, for example, the space, that's the physical layout, objects that are present in the space like office equipment, machines, or power tools, actors, which are the people that are working there, the feelings, emotions, or activities of the people working there, events, it could be a meeting, for example, or the timing of events and when they happen. Those are all considered descriptive observation. After you have that initial idea of what is happening in the workplace through descriptive observation, the researcher will next move on to focused or selective observation. In this stage, you really emphasize feelings, emotions, activities, and events rather than just like the physical layout and space and people that are there. You're looking for connections between them. By observing these things, the researcher can look for patterns and emerging themes that they want to focus more on. They can also determine like what events and activities are regular and which ones are irregular. Some things you can look for in this stage are to observe events, actions, and behavior to look for a storyline, sort out regular from irregular, look for variations in storylines, look for any negative cases or exceptions, so things that don't normally happen. If your observation is structured, develop a plan for systematic observation, including an estimate of how many observations will be enough. And finally, you must take good field notes. The only way you can capture what you're observing is by taking good field notes. So you have to have like a template and a plan so that you can accurately record what you're going to observe, conversations that happen, just general notes on a daily basis. These notes need to be accurate, complete, detailed, and as objective as possible. So how do you do that? Use exact quotes when possible. Use pseudonyms to protect confidentiality. That means not using people's real names. Describe activities in the order they occur. Provide descriptions without inferring the meaning. So that means don't place your own bias in the situation. Include relevant background information to situate the event so people understand when they're reading the notes what is happening. Separate the researcher's thoughts and assumptions from just the pure observation, and record all dates, times, places, and the name of the researcher on each set of notes. The researcher does get to decide on the level of detail they include in their field notes and how much context is included. So you need to make sure that the field notes are viewed as both being data and somewhat data analysis, because the researcher makes choices for what they record along the way. So they are doing some forms of analysis. And this is a more in-depth look at participant observation, which is the most commonly used type of observation to collect primary data.